Hello fans and friends, welcome to another video. My name's Keir Smith. Today's video is a game we can all play, and I urge anyone watching this video to share this with friends, family and music lovers everywhere. I'm asking, imagine you can take only one album from each decade to listen to for the rest of your life. You must pick only one album from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties, 10's and 20's. Now that should have everybody's brain racing, but before you decide, there are a couple of rules. Your selection from each decade has to be an actual album, so it can't be a compilation, so no collections or best ofs. And you can't duplicate the artist. So for example, if you choose a Beatles album from the 60s, you can't then choose a John Lennon album from the 70s. But other than that, you're good to go. So one album from each decade from the 50s through to the 20s. You should end up with 8 albums in total, and I'll go through my selections with you now. And I'll also give you a few of my favourite songs from each album. So my selection from the 1950s is where this rock and roll craze all began. This is the debut album from Elvis Presley, released on the 13th of March 1956. This is good time rock and roll. Elvis and his superb backing band of DJ Fontana, Bill Black, Chet Atkins and Scotty Moore rattle their way through these 12 songs: rockabilly, country, rhythm and blues and ballads. There's some great cover versions on this album of the rock and roll legends like Little Richard, Ray Charles and Carl Perkins, and Elvis often makes these songs his own. And it's mostly 2.5 minute songs, in and out, no messing about. It's good, it's very good. John Lennon once famously said, "Before Elvis there was nothing, the king had arrived, long live the king." And to give you 3 songs from this classic album, I'll go with Blue Suede Shoes, I Got a Woman and Just Because. My selection for the 1960s is the self-titled album by the Beatles, released on the 22nd of November 1968. For this decade, it was an easy pick. It was always going to be an album by the Beatles. It was just a case of choosing which one, and I greedily went for the White Album. It's got 30 songs on it. This is the Beatles at their sprawling best. This album has everything you could possibly need, all under one roof. And I love all of the musical styles that this album has to offer: rock, blues, heavy rock, folk, country, dancehall, avant-garde. And then it all ends with a song sung by Ringo that sounds like a lush Disney type song. And I love it all. And when I play the album, I always make a point of playing it in its entirety. There's no skipping Revolution 9 here. And as there's 30 songs on this double album, I'll give you 5 of my favourites, which are Dear Prudence, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness is a Warm Gun, Julia and Your Blues. And my selection for the 1970s is another double album and another rock opera. This is Quadrophenia by The Who, released on the 26th of October 1973. This is an amazing album, perfectly executed and realised. And if someone said to me, "What is rock and roll to you?" I'd say Quadrophenia. And the story of this album follows Jimmy, a pill-popping mod, struggling to fit in and find his way in the world. For me, many of the songs here are among The Who's finest. The rhythm section of Keith Moon and John Entwistle is incredible on this album. I think it's Roger Daltrey's best singing, and I also think it's Pete Townshend's best writing, and likely his best guitar playing. There are classic guitar parts galore on this album. The band literally fly through this 17-song set as if they were all pumped full of amphetamines themselves, which they probably were, among other things. This album's got serious attitude, it's all heart, and it always gets my blood pumping. No doubt it's an artistic triumph, and I'll give you 4 of my favourite songs from this album, which are The Real Me, Cut My Hair, Drowned and Dr. Jimmy. My selection from the 1980s is The Final Cut by Pink Floyd, released on the 21st of March 1983. I bought and first heard this album in the year 2000, and it only took a few listens for me to decide that this was my favourite Pink Floyd album, and it always has been. I'm not entirely sure why, but I am so emotionally connected with this album. It's a concept album that follows the story of a returning war hero who struggles to readjust and connect with the modern world that he now finds himself in. And his suffering and disillusionment is put across by the lyrical brilliance of Roger Waters in such a fierce and heartfelt way. It's far from a Roger Waters solo album though. It features some of Dave Gilmour's best guitar playing. Roger Waters sounds pained and tortured on this album, and it's an emotional ride for sure, but if you connect with it, the rewards are endless. And to give you three of my favourite songs from this absolute masterpiece, I will give you three songs that all feature incredible guitar solos from Dave Gilmour. I'll go with Your Possible Pasts, The Final Cut, and Not Now John. And for my selection from the 90s, this is The Holy Bible by the Manic Street Preachers, released on the 29th of August, 1994. This is a loud, abrasive, full-on, post-punk, heavy rock assault on the ears. It reaches a blistering pace at times, with some frantic James Dean Bradfield guitar solos. And then there's a few really tender moments, which gives the album some necessary balance. But make no mistake, this is a dark and chaotic album that takes in subjects like the Holocaust, anorexia, prostitution, and general despair. The majority of this album was written before Richie Edwards was hospitalised for depression, and this isn't an easy album to listen to. It's an attack on the world and of the self, but the songwriting is absolutely fascinating. I must admit, when I first heard this album, I had no idea what Richie and Nicky were writing about. But I went away and I looked up so many things after listening to this album, so it taught me a lot. This is another artistic triumph, and to give you three of my favourite songs from it, I'll go with Archives of Pain, Mausoleum, and Faster. And for my selection from the noughts or the noughties, this is A Bigger Bang by the Rolling Stones, released on the 6th of September 2005. There's 16 songs on A Bigger Bang, and not a bad one among them. This would be in my top 5 Stones albums. I think this is a great album. The albums that came before this, Voodoo Lounge and Bridges to Babylon, were both good, but I thought that this was a marked improvement. The Stones sound revitalised here, full of vigour and swagger. Simply, it's a great rock and roll album in the Stones' very own unmistakable style. You've got the rock steady beat from Charlie on drums, stellar guitar interplay between Ronnie and Keith, crunching, catchy riffs and superb solos. And Mick never fails. He whispers, growls and roars his way through this set of songs with real confidence. He's so great. I mean, think about it. Does Mick ever do a bad vocal? And I really like the lyrics across this album, as Mick takes some not so thinly veiled swipes at the government and some of the women who have clearly upset him along the way. And as there's 16 songs on this album, I'll give you 4 of my favourites, which are It Won't Take Long, Rain Fall Down, Streets of Love, and Dangerous Beauty. My album from the 10's is 1989 by Taylor Swift, released on the 27th of October 2014. This was Taylor Swift's big shot at the mainstream, and my word, she hit a bullseye. And this is a shiny, glossy, expertly produced, 80s inspired synth pop masterpiece. This is a perfect pop album. This album is jam-packed with pop sensibilities, great melodies, catchy hooks, singable choruses. But I love Taylor's lyrics. They're both thoughtful and clever, and the way that she makes the words rhyme without it sounding corny, it's not an easy thing to do. And of course she has those crystal clear, angelic vocals, which are great. There's 13 songs on 1989, and I love them all. But to give you three of my favourites, I'll go with Blank Space, All You Had to Do Was Stay, and I Wish You Would. And finally, my album from the 20s is Notes on a Conditional Form by the 1975, released on the 22nd of May 2020. It's down to the toss of a coin between this and the Beatles' White Album for who wins the most eclectic album of all time. The album opens with a spoken word, environmentally conscious speech from Greta Thunberg. There's punk, symphonic, garage, house, acoustic folk, emo, country, and various other sub-rock genres. You even get a guest appearance from reggae artist DJ Cutty Ranks on one track. I think it's the 1975's most ambitious album. They really up the stakes with this one. It's an album that fidgets and shifts restlessly, but I really think that the band are convincing in all of the styles and genres that they reach for. And it's a great sounding album. I really love the production. George Daniel is a whiz kid. And Matty Healy's writing and lyrics are taken to another level. He is sensational. And there's a lot of reflection in these lyrics that often deal with addiction and recovery. I love Matty's voice. I love the auto-tuned vocals. I like the instrumental passages. This album is incredible. This is a brave and daring album, and I think it's brilliant. The 1975 are head and shoulders above any band in the world at the minute for me. And I'll give you 5 of my favourite songs from this album: Frail State of Mind, The Birthday Party, Me and You Together Song, What Should I Say, and Bagsy Not in Net. So there you go, they were my 8 selections, an album from every decade. A quick recap then: from the 50s I chose the self-titled album by Elvis Presley. From the 60s I chose the self-titled album by the Beatles. From the 70s I chose Quadrophenia by The Who. And from the 80s I chose The Final Cut by Pink Floyd. From the 90s, The Holy Bible by Manic Street Preachers. From the noughties, A Bigger Bang by the Rolling Stones. From the 10's, 1989 by Taylor Swift. And finally, from the 20s, Notes on a Conditional Form by the 1975. I'd love to hear from as many people as possible in the comments section below. So good luck to you if you're choosing your one album from each decade. And if you don't particularly like the 50s or 60s even, for example, just give me your selections from the 70s through to the 20s. I'm really interested to read what you all come up with. Please give the video the thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel. There'll be lots more to come. Thanks as always for watching. See you next time.